Alrighty, so before I do one of the more anticipated moving forward series that is talk about the Seattle Sounders, I just want to quickly mention the fact that I actually had a little difficult time in terms of what jerseys or shirts should I decide to wear for this episode because ironically, as much as I hate the Seattle Sounders, I actually have the most jersey and t-shirt from the Seattle Sounders that is not named the San Jose Earthquakes and Minnesota United in my collection. So I could have easily gone with their home jerseys this year that I bought from the stadium when I went to watch them play against Nashville SC. Or I could have gone with the Jimi Hendrix jersey that they released, I think, last year. Or I could have gone with the old-fashioned Orca logo, which, you know, if you're watching this video, you probably know which one I decided to choose. Because, well, for the Sounders, this was kind of a historic year in a good and a bad way. So, in a good way, where they becoming the first MLS team to ever win the CONCACAF Champions League and finally answer that long-lasting question of whether or not if an MLS team is ever going to win the CONCACAF Champions League, and the answer is yes. They are going to be that team to win the CONCACAF Champions League. But in a historic year where it's not so good is that this is the first year that they missed the playoffs in their franchise history. Coming into this season, they had the longest active playoff streak coming in, and yeah, this did eventually came to an end. And we probably know what was the main suspect of why eventually their long playoff streak eventually did come to an end this season. Now, in terms of this season, they finished with a 12-5-17 record, which is by far the worst record that they had so far in their MLS franchise history, and they finished with 41 points, which is by far the lowest that they have so far in their time in MLS. But what's interesting in terms of the goal scored and goal allowed is that they actually had a positive goal differential, which is kind of crazy for a team that, you know, they finished 11 in the Western Conference, and usually when you see teams that finish like in the two-digit number in the standings, you do not expect them to have a goal difference that is positive, which maybe kind of just sums up the fact that, you know, the Sounders, they're kind of a team that they do win games, and they win big, but when they lose games, they don't get actually blown out, because I think that's maybe the reason why their goal differential is actually positive, and they've scored 47 goals this season while allowing 46 goals with a +1 goal differential. And again, those numbers are kind of very average in terms of the league, which, you know, for the Sounders, that's just not good enough, because we know that this team is considered one of the best goal scoring team, and also for many years one of the best defensive teams. So to be in the middle of the road kind of sums up why they didn't make it to the playoffs, and one of the many reasons that they didn't make it to the playoffs. And as I mentioned, they finished 11 in the Western Conference, by far the lowest that they ever finished in their time in MLS. But on a high note, they of course won the CONCACAF Champions League, and again, you know, this season it's kind of almost like a roller coaster, kind of bittersweet season if you're a Sounders fan. Like, on one hand, you did something that no other MLS team has ever done, but then on the other, you also did something that no other Sounders team has done, not in a good way, which is missing the playoffs. Now, top goal scored for the Seattle Sounders, like what I said in the Atlanta United video, it's kind of surprising we didn't have a double-digit goal score coming for the Sounders, because usually Raul Ruidíaz is the guy that finished double-digit goals, but this season he actually finished with 9 goals, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was missing with this team and spent time on the IR, probably the most this year, and hence that's why he was only able to score 9 goals, followed by Nico Lodeiro with 7 goals, Jordan Morris with 7 goals, Freddie Montero with 4 goals, and Christian Roldan with 4 goals. Top assist leader, unsurprisingly, Nico Lodeiro tops that list with 11 assists, followed by the Roldan brothers. First, we got Alex Roldan with 7 assists, Christian Roldan with 5 assists, Jordan Morris with 4 assists, and Leo Chu to round up the top 5 assist leader for the Seattle Sounders with 3 assists. Now, the highlights of the Sounders season, I mean, it's pretty obvious what was the highlights, and I know this might not be MLS related, but let's be honest. The real highlights of this team came back in May when they become the first team to conquer that CCL mountain, and also becoming the first team to overcome a Liga MX team in the final. And it was not easy. I mean, as much as I know in the second leg they won big by winning 3-0, and it was kind of almost like a party atmosphere at what was that then? I think it was still called Lumens Field, because I know CenturyLink Field was was they changed that name last year. But yeah, back then it was just a party atmosphere and a historic kind of moment where the Sounders were able to finally becoming the first team to win CCL. But it wasn't without some adversity. And remember, as much as everybody will remember that second leg game, people will sometimes forget that this team were down 2-0 in the first leg, and down in Mexico when they played against Pumas when they were down 2-0. It looked like it was here we go again. It seems like it's another disappointment for MLS team where they're going to lose a Liga MX team and don't do well. And then they, of course, eventually did come back with 2 penalties from Ruidíaz, and that I think was a big turning point, because if they did not get those 2 goals to come back, or even if they do lose 2-1 in that one, I don't know if they could have overcome what they did, or did something that they did in the second leg. So yeah, I think overall, that's going to be something that's going to be remembered for a very long time, or at least until we see another MLS team, of course, win CCL and continue to close the gap, and really now getting into the discussion that MLS is really catching into Liga MX. Like, the gap is really closing real big, and it could be getting to a point where, I think this might be optimistic, but I will say that maybe in 10 years time, the league would pass Liga MX in terms of what you have this long debate for the past 10 years or so of which exactly is the best league in the CONCACAF region. But in terms of the lowlights of this team, so as much as they have so much highlights in the CONCACAF Champions League, in MLS, that's been a different story. And, one of the biggest lowlights for this season, and maybe one of the biggest reason why they missed the playoffs, is injuries. And especially to the midfield. I mean, losing João Paulo was just almost a death sentence, but also losing his replacement in Obert Vargas, and that they were down to kind of like the 3rd and 4th string kind of midfielders. Yeah, that really hurts, and that you can definitely see it in the sense that the Sounders, there was times where they were kind of overwhelmed in the midfield, that we don't usually see that happen. And I could guarantee you that if they do have João Paulo or even Obert Vargas back in this team should not be like what we've seen before in some of these games, where they just don't look like the same in the midfield. They were just getting overwhelmed. And then, of course, they ran out of gas to make their usual second half resurgence. So, for many time we were thinking, well, it's probably going to be unthinkable for the Sounders to miss the playoffs, because we know that they're going to eventually make that second half resurgence. And there was hint that it looked like it was going to happen. But I think by the time when we get to August, and especially as we get into September, where they did kind of show at least a little bit of life, but it feels like they just kind of ran out of steam. And you can even tell it from some of the players' faces, where they just don't have that intensity and that energy that we've seen from the Sounders team that always make the second half resurgent. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's been a long season for them. I mean, we talk about the thing about CCL and how for a long time, because of the fact that MLS has this very restrictive roster kind of rules, and that MLS teams are just not built to basically compete in both competition and a high quality. You knew that we always seen before, where MLS team just had to sacrifice one tournament for another. And in this case, while the Sounders made a great deep run in CCL and eventually winning the whole thing, that kind of physical and mental kind of drain really took out on this team. And it's getting to a rate where, I talk about injuries to the midfield. They were also suffering injury all over the field. I mean, for a while, they did not had even some of their key players like Lodeiro and Ruidíaz in the starting 11, and they even missed Cristian Roldan for the last couple of weeks down the stretch, where we usually see this was the time where it's the second half resurgence was going to happen. So because of that, and the fact that the depth this season for the Sounders hasn't been as good as what we've seen in previous year, just kind of led to the downfall of a low light that I actually didn't put it on here, but it's pretty obvious that this is, of course, going to be a low light the first time that they missed the playoffs in their franchise history. Now, in terms of the biggest win this season for the Sounders, I mean, that's not even a discussion. It has to be that 3-0 win against Pumas in the second leg of the CONCACAF Champions League. And I know it's not involving MLS, and I'm kind of cheating there a little bit, but I mean, you can't tell me how that is not the biggest win this season, and probably the biggest win in the Seattle Sounders franchise history, maybe right up there or even above when they won that MLS Cup against TFC back in 2016 to lift their first ever trophy. Because again, coming into this year, no team has ever won CCL, so to finally do it in that fashion, yeah, easily the biggest win of the season, and you could even argue the biggest moment and a watershed moment for this league history, where it finally has the argument, the fact that, hey, we can definitely stand up to Liga MX, and we're definitely closing the gap because we finally answered the decade-old question of can an MLS team win CCL, and until they can't win it, you can't really kind of say that that MLS have really closed the gap on Liga MX. But the biggest loss this season for the Sounders, I mean, I could have easily gone with you know, for me, I would have said that the 2-1 loss they had against RSL was a big turning point, where I think that was a game where, you know, before, when we see previous Sounders team when they were up 1-0 like that at home, they don't usually kind of just fold over like that. But in the second half, that's what happened in that RSL game. They conceded those 2 goals, and that was really kind of a ripple effect of the fact that maybe the Sounders team just doesn't have it. But I think really you got to say that the biggest loss this season, I mean, as it is the case, whenever the Sounders lose to their rival, the Portland Timbers, you got to put it up there, and that this was definitely easily the biggest loss, because again, that was the game where I think coming into it, you know, I even mentioned that whoever loses that game most likely is going to miss the playoffs, and that it's a must-win game for both of these teams. We have not seen a Cascadia derby that big in terms of playoff implication, but here we are. Whoever, of course, win that game will have a chance to make the playoffs. Whoever loses most likely is not going to make the playoffs, and the Sounders lost that one, and that you just kind of had a sense that it was not going to be there, and that, you know, even though there was some belief that they can, of course, get things going, you know, winning that Cascadia derby, I've talked about many times of how much it not only means to your team get one over your bragging, or get some bragging rights and get one over your rival, but it can really propel your season. And we saw it with the Timbers immediately went on a decent run, while the Sounders were still sputtering, and eventually just have too much of a gap to overcome after they lost that Cascadia derby. Now, in terms of the average attendance, 33,607. That's still good for third in the league. I mean, the attendance have started to kind of gone down a little bit. I mean, I remember at the peak of the Sounders year, when they were with the peak of the power, especially in the mid 2010s and even in the late 2010s, they were averaging close to about 40,000. Now it's started to kind of decline a little bit, and it's kind of interesting why that is the case. I guess maybe because, you know, with the Sounders not doing as much, you're going to have some fair weather fans started to kind not wanted to buy the tickets to go to the game, but also not to mention the fact that, you know, we're still in a pandemic kind of season, and attendance has been kind of gone down throughout the league. So I'm not going to just say that, well, the reason why the attendance has started to gone down in Sounders game is because people are starting to lose their interest, because this team is not as good as it used to, and not as well known names as it used to. I really think it still goes down to the pandemic, and also the fact that the tickets to Sounders games are not cheap. Like when I went to that game between the Sounders and Nashville SC, you know, I did get some good seats, but they cost like $91 to attend the game, and that's you know, I think that's a fair amount for a Sounders game. But, you know, for a guy that had usually only pay like $40 to go to Quakes game, that is definitely more on the expensive side. And not to mention, if you even want to get closer into the action, those tickets are like $100, and Sounders tickets have always been considered to be one of the most expensive one in the league. Now, in terms of revelation and MVP, I mean, it's Raul Ruidíaz. I mean, I could say either Ruidíaz or Lodeiro on that list, but I think Ruidíaz has more of an impact, because you can see that when they did not have him down the stretch, how much it really kind of hurt this team. And by the time he came back, I just had a feeling the Sounders probably rushed him, because he didn't really look like the same when he came back from that injury, and that when you try to rush someone back from an injury, it actually does more harm than good, because, you know, if a player is not 100% fit, they're not going to do the usual things that they usually do, and that I think down the stretch they probably rushed him a little bit too soon to come back, but still he's just a vital part to this team in terms of the goal scoring and even at times creating the chances. The disappointment of this season, I mean, the replacement for the midfielder. So guys like Daniel Leyva and Josh Atencio, two guys that definitely had some good potential to be a decent midfield partnership there in the Sounders team. Boy, they were a huge disappointment this season because they did not look good whatsoever, and that, I think that kind of is sums up why they are considered like down in the depth chart, because you know, once the Sounders lose their two most important midfielder in João Paulo and also Albert Vargas, you can see that they might have some issue in the depth chart in terms of that. And you know, they were maybe hoping Leyva and Atencio could be at least, I wouldn't say general replacement, but at least have some quality where they don't see like a massive drop in terms of quality down in the depth chart in the midfield. But we definitely saw it, and it's kind of disappointing too, because like I said, both of these guys, they had good potential to do well for the Sounders team. Some even consider it to be the future of the Sounders team in terms of this midfield partnership, and it just never worked out. Now, moving forward for the Sounders team, remember how I said before that Sporting KC was going to be the team that most likely will make it to the playoffs next season despite missing it this year? Well, that was before when I thought the Seattle Sounders were going to miss the playoffs. Like, at that point, I didn't think the Sounders were going to miss the playoffs until when it was officially confirmed, and that I think after that, I would say that unfortunately for Sporting KC, move over, because I think the Seattle Sounders are the one that most likely is making it back to the playoffs. I mean, when you look at this team, there is no way this team is going to miss the playoffs next season. Like, once they get some of their most important pieces back healthy next season, I think this is going to be once again a top team. And I do really believe that really the reason why this season kind of gone wrong in the league for the Sounders has to be with CCL, and also the amount of bad injury luck that they had. And again, that kind of brings me to the second point, where no CCL to worry about. Now the focus are fully on the league. That will definitely help the Sounders team, and that you know, in case if they do get off to a slow start again, which I wouldn't be surprised that's the case, at least I think I will be more confident that they can gear up to have a second half resurgence. Whereas last year, you know, they probably couldn't have that second half resurgence is because they just are completely exhausted of a long season that they already had. And then the other thing moving forward that is kind of interesting is out goes the Garth Lagerwey heir, and in comes the Craig Waibel heir. So Garth Lagerwey no longer with the Seattle Sounders. Yeah, he's now become the new president of Atlanta United. So now it seems like the Sounders decided to hire Craig Waibel, who have a good relationship with the Sounders, and especially with the head coach Brian Schmidt. So yeah, I think this is there's not really going to be too much of a drop off. I think Craig Waibel has done a really good job, especially doing his time with Real Salt Lake. So I think this should be pretty good in that, you know, yes, losing Garth Lagerwey is definitely tough, but replacing it with Craig Waibel, I don't think that's going to be too much of a drop off, and the Sounders are still going to be like that team that is going to consider to be a regular contender in the Western Conference. And then the last thing I would say moving forward for this team is that, you know, this season you kind of sense that maybe this is the last run with this core. I mean, this core that the Sounders has been having for the past couple of years, it started to age a little bit. You know, Nico Lodeiro, I think he's going to be 34 next season, and same with Ruidíaz, who's going to turn 33. And once you get into your mid 30s, I mean, I think they're still going to be top quality player, but Father Time is eventually going to catch up. And that, you know I'm going to definitely throw that little cliche of Father Time is always remain undefeated. And that, of course, is the case where, again, you know, if they want to get one last good run and one last MLS Cup run before they might start to go through a little bit of a transitional period, maybe find some guys that could be the good replacement for Lodeiro and Ruidíaz. This is the year to do so. So yeah, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And as always, if you're a Sounders fan, what do you think went right, or the highlights and the lowlights, and the revelation MVP or the disappointment for this season? And moving forward, how is next season it is going to look like? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.